Hello there, this is Tom Morgan from The Leading Edge. Today I'm joined by Dr. Julia Mossbridge and Dr. Eric Smith. Dr. Mossbridge is an affiliate professor in the Department of Biophysics and Physics at the University of San Diego, a senior consultant with Tangible IQ, the co-founder and board chair of TILT, the Institute for Love and Time. She's the founder of Mossbridge Institute and an author and co-author of multiple books and scientific articles related to artificial intelligence and human potential. Her postdoc was in cognitive neuroscience at Northwestern. Her PhD was in communication sciences and disorders at Northwestern. Her MA was in neuroscience at UC San Francisco, and she was awarded her BA in neuroscience with highest honors from Oberlin. She is joined by Dr. Eric Smith, who is the executive director of the Institute for Love and Time, TILT. We were chatting before we hit record about my observation that in the last 10 years of being drawn to spiritual concepts from within a more traditional kind of left-brained finance and tech industry, that you literally never encounter the word love in any context whatsoever, in any equity research report, any tech schematics, or indeed really even in traditional science. And Dr. Mossbridge has always stood out to me as someone who is an extremely serious scientist who talks a lot about love and time, and has even shown me some absolutely revelatory stuff on psi as well, which has been a topic of recent interest, thanks to our member, Dr. Mona Sobhani. So welcome, guys. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
My first question is an incredibly easy one. What is love?
Oh, yeah. Cool. Do you want me to start on that one, Eric? Okay. Yeah. So let's narrow it down a little bit, because there are multiple kinds of love, and the kind of love that people are starting to feel that they can mention in public tends to be what I would call conditional love. So I love this house. I love you, but only if you love me back. This is conditional love, and people are starting to feel okay to say, like, that's really powerful. That they think about it, I think, generally as a human emotion. Love is seen as, in sort of the mainstream psychology world, as a human emotion of attachment, connection, positive attachment and connection, and that's what I would call conditional love. Unconditional love, to me, is an entirely different thing. We can have an emotional response to unconditional love, and we do. It's a powerful emotional response when we access or are in the presence of unconditional love. It is a motivational emotional response. It is a transformative response, which is ironic because unconditional love ends up being the experience that you defined in human emotional terms. We'll get to the deeper stuff in a second, but ends up being the experience that you can love and that you can feel loved without anything having to change. So the human experience of it is that you can love and you can feel loved without anything having to change. So that's a human experience of unconditional love, and it's truly motivational for change, which is ironic or paradoxical or both, because you no longer have this experience that anything needs to change, and then suddenly everything changes, and you're okay with that too. So it's very interesting dynamic. It's very dynamic. And what causes that? What does it mean to say, are you in the presence of, or do you access unconditional love? It's like a force in the universe. It's like being in the access of this, in being able to access the sun, or being in the presence of the sun, like the sun coming through the window right now. I did not cause that. I can tell you for sure, I did not cause that to happen, right? The sun is going to get up in the morning and go to bed at night, whether I'm alive or dead. And when I'm alive, I can access that, and I can choose to access that. So it's like a natural force that you can choose to access. We could talk about free will and choice if you want to later when we get into the precognition stuff, but in any case, let's just say that you can access it. It can be accessed. And when it is accessed, when you are in the presence of unconditional love, it feels like it's a force that takes you over, and you have this experience of like, nothing needs to change to be loved. Not just accepting everything. This is not just acceptance. Literally loving everything the way it is. That's the experience without anything needing to change. I can't say that enough, because so many people think, okay, I'm going to put on my list of things to do to feel more unconditional love. And it's funny because when you access unconditional love, you don't even have that to change on your list. Nothing needs to change. So it's a profound motivational human experience of something that I believe is a natural force.
Magical, thank you. So the first time I ever heard you speak was at Dr. Mona Sobhani and Alice in Paradise's conference. And I remember you kind of blew my mind with a single statement, which is that the precognitive ability improves in a state of unconditional love. And I was like, that entire sentence just like doesn't. So tell me a bit more about that.
Sure. I'll just break down the sentence.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what I was meaning by precognitive ability. So precognitive ability of the type that I was talking about means the capacity to retrieve from your unconscious mind information about a future event that would be randomly selected in the future, and report that before the event is randomly selected and then shown to you. So the event in this case is an image that is randomly selected from, say, 600 images, I think, in that study. And your capacity, for among the people I've tested, the capacity to retrieve information that's relevant to describe this upcoming image, as compared to, for instance, a control image judged by independent judges, is better. The information is better, significantly better, if you're in a state of unconditional love. And that's from two studies, one with 35 people who were not like trained precognitives or anything, and one with 307 people who are also not trained precognitives. So I developed previously a 4 or 5 question questionnaire to help people figure out, if they're feeling the experience of unconditional love right now, with respect to themselves, with respect to others, with respect to animals, strangers, the device on which you're doing the survey, kind of thing. And really telling was the level at which they felt love towards the device on which they were doing the survey. That really differentiated precognitive capacity. So if people felt so much unconditional love that they were feeling love towards their computer on which they were doing the survey, then those are the folks who were significantly better than chance at precognition.
Why do you think that is?
Well, partly because they're doing the precognition task also on the computer. So if you have a relationship with your computer, if you think of everything as being capable of being in relationship with you, and you're feeling this expansive, like, look, nothing needs to change. I don't need to try to force this to behave in a certain way or give me a certain response. I could just be in this love connection with this everything around me. Then it makes sense to me, I guess, because I've seen so much capacity to do precognition. That doesn't surprise me, but it makes sense that that capacity would open up in relationship with this device.
So to ask a different way, why
What
do
did
you,
I just
why,
say?
no. Why do you think it's love that makes the difference?
Well, I don't know. I mean, like, you could have done the same experiment with hate. It could be a strong feeling,
Yeah. Because
right?
the reason why it's such a hook for me is basically that I think a lot of people will hear love and they'll hear something kind of imprecise and fuzzy, right? One of my favorite little factoids is that English has one word for love and Sanskrit has 96,
Right.
allegedly. Like it's this very imprecise language which we have a limited capacity to feel, and yet you're telling me in an experimental format this has observable results for a particular reason.
Yeah, I mean, what I can do is link you to a lay audience article that I wrote about 5 myths about unconditional love, because I gave a paragraph definition, and it's part of the questionnaire, right? A paragraph definition of what unconditional love is being considered in this questionnaire. So we didn't leave anything to chance. It's like, no strings attached, nothing needs to change, very developmental and beautiful. It's all good. Um, So there's that. But in terms of whether it could be hate or something, maybe, but I would just like to say the reason why I wanted to test them with unconditional love is because anecdotally I'd heard from people who are in the Stargate program, which is the government's program about remote viewing, which many people probably heard about, but also was precognition was validated as early as 1995 using that program, and it was stated in the final report that actually killed the program 5 times that precognition is actually useful, or at least statistically significant. And so precognition in the Stargate program, the folks who practiced it are some of the people I respect most highly on the planet. I mean, because why? Because over time, doing this kind of remote viewing, accessing information in time and space, different than where we are, where they were, it does something to you. It's a practice that changes your mind. It opens things up, and almost, as far as I can tell, people I know who practice it, almost all of them move towards this unconditional love kind of spiritual direction. So that's why I wanted to test it, is because I had already seen that these people had been doing this for decades, were more focused on this incredible love, self-transcendence state. And so I thought, well, maybe there's something to that. So I also don't like to test, like I could test hate or strong emotion. I tested anxiety in that study and found that women in particular, when they're more anxious, actually, or when they report themselves as being more anxious, are actually more correct. But I don't like to test things like hate or whatever because it doesn't feel ethical. Like I don't want to know if you're hateful, if you're better at remote viewing, because I don't want people to go be hateful so they can get better at precognitive remote viewing. You know what I mean?
That's a good answer.
So there's that.
Yeah, Julia, would you see unconditional love as something that operates without regard for the arrow of time?
Yeah, it's like unconditional love. That's a really good point. If it is a universal force, it doesn't follow time and it doesn't follow space. It doesn't decay with space. It doesn't decay with time or have a directionality. So sometimes when I take myself seriously and say it's a universal force, then I think that way. And that's why, you know, people would, when they're accessing unconditional love, would be better at precognition because those things are opened up to them. When I'm feeling more mainstream psychological, I would say, no, that person isn't having a psychological response to an experience that's freeing them up so that they can listen to their unconscious better and they can accept what it says. But both of those things could also be true, or neither. But I love that idea of the physical explanation of like, you're now with this boundarylessness. So you don't have this boundary in time. So of course you get the information.
Well, one of the guiding principles of my entire life has basically been this concept that following your curiosity often reflects a non-logical but much more benign evolutionary path than the alternatives. And that seems to mesh very closely with this idea of love working across time, but also potentially signaling a beneficial direction. Is that too much of a leap?
No, I mean, curiosity is like a step forward towards unconditional love. It seems, or towards accessing unconditional love, because curiosity puts you in a frame. I mean, when you can get there, it's not like you can always get there. Sometimes you're like, I can't get to curiosity. But when you can get there, it puts you in a frame of being open instead of thinking that something has to be different than it is. And that, so it's a step towards acceptance of all that is, which is a step towards loving all that is. So to me, it's like if you could draw a graph of the number of times people can get to curiosity, and then a graph that people can get to acceptance, and a graph of people getting to unconditional love, these would be overlapping graphs, but there would be a smaller peak on the unconditional love one because we aren't trained to go that far. It's like we hit like a joy thing, and then people start asking these questions like, oh, well, I get how unconditional love would work in my personal life, but I couldn't do it in the office. And I should send you a lay article, a discussion that I wrote with Martin his last name is Miklos or something like this. He's a European CEO. And he said that to me. He's like, I love what you're doing on unconditional love. And I could see it in my home life, from my family and friends. But like, I can't have unconditional love at the office. What if I have to fire someone? And I was like, right. So you love them exactly as they are. And they're not a fit for the organization, but you love them exactly as they are. And it's exciting because they're going to go off and do something that's better suited to them. And the organization's going to thrive because this person who's trying to work there who doesn't really fit the organization is going to be gone. And it's all awesome. Right. But so we had that whole conversation. So people stop short of unconditional love, I think, because they think, okay, why do they stop short of accessing unconditional love habitually? I think it's because we secretly believe this idea that we have power that we don't have, that our judgment about something is going to change things. Like, I can't love that person for being drunk and throwing up all over me and stealing my money. Like, I can't be unconditionally loving of that because I wish it would have been another way. It's like, of course you wish it would have been another way. That sucks. Like, you don't want anyone to do that. And loving everything exactly as it is means including that. And you can walk away and you can report the person to the police and you can love that too. Like, it's like we believe we have this power by judging, by an emotional judgment. We're going to make it better. Or we're going to make, like, that person's going to be punished or something. I mean, I don't get it. I do get it, but I don't get it. Do you know what I mean, Eric? Does this make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that's whenever I give the elevator pitch for Tilt, our organization that's love-centered, I think the most common thing that I get back is a feeling that means no boundaries. When I think the reality is that having unconditional love empowers you to create boundaries because you're not altering that unconditional love by creating the boundaries. And we run into this all the time when we're talking about how do we integrate that into our app development. Because it's like, okay, maybe somebody is saying something in the community that we don't want them to say. Do we need to censor that? Or can we empower the users to set those boundaries for themselves where they get to hear what they would like to hear and we don't have to tell somebody they're bad for having their opinion?
Exactly. Great example.
Well, I really want to get onto the app in a bit because my wife takes great issue with any rabbit hole I go down because she's like, is this topic making you a better husband or a better father? Yes, I know you're now suddenly interested in Psi and UAPs. Is it making you better at home? And it was I've got to go back to the hook, Julia, about you saying, one, this is trainable, and two, it tends to lead into the direction of unconditional love. I've heard you describe in other interviews a process where you can cultivate precognition. Is that something you'd be willing to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, the process is pretty easy. You want to find a modality that, yeah, I'm happy to talk about it, but also it's also like everyone's birthright. And so it always kind of bugs me that people don't just play around with it, but I get the resistance. There's a lot of fear actually that people have about losing their identity when you start thinking about time differently, because we think of ourselves as everything that makes us up in the past. And when you have a balanced time perspective, which Eric loves to talk about, which is what we try to create with our technology at Tilt, you not only acknowledge yeah, that was the past and that's part of me, but the future is part of me too. And what I'm looking forward to and what I'm planning for in the future is part of me too. And that can help people be less afraid to do these kind of experiments with precognition. You just start to think about your life like a landscape rather than a tunnel. What part of the landscape am I on now? Oh, there's that mountain over there. I got to get ready, And so the process is shifting your view of time. And one way to do that is by leaving yourself little messages, your future self little messages, and mentally sending messages back to your past self. That's just a life hack that we already know reaps benefits psychologically, regardless of whether you become precognitive. Okay, so let's say you're doing that life hack. Now what? Well, now you're gonna have a sense of your modality. How does your information about the future come to you? Some people feel it. They don't know what's going on, but they feel weird, like there's about to be an earthquake or there's about to be a fire or something, right? So it's like a somatosensory thing. Some people hear, have like they'll hear lyrics to a song and then the plane will crash or something like, or they'll hear their best friend's voice and then their friend will call in their mind, right? So visual, somatosensory, taste, smell. Does it come to you like a movie? Some people just see the whole thing and that's what happened. People know. Does it come to you in dreams? People know when you start thinking about it, everyone knows how this information comes to them. And then they doubt it, right? When the thing happens, right? Oh, I had this dream about it and then it happened, but like, how could that possibly be real? I'm going to doubt it. That's totally reasonable. You should doubt it. It's fine. But if you keep a notebook and just commit to writing down these things that you might call synchronicities or precognitions or prophecies or oracles or whatever, you'll start to notice that your brain, because your brain believes you when you tell it what's important to you. So like you tell your wife, UAPs and aliens and psi is now important to me. What she's saying is like, tell your brain that this other stuff is more important because your brain will spend time and attention, intention and attention on whatever you say is important to you. So if you take a notebook and you're writing down these pieces, right, or just drawing this picture that you can't get out of your head and you don't know why, and then like 2 days later you see that on the book cover or something, that tells your brain, this is important to me. I want to get better at this. And then your brain does the rest. Just like when you're learning a musical instrument, right? When you practice a musical instrument, you're telling your brain, this is important to me. I want to learn this song, and then boom.
And you've said as well that this is, one of the earliest and most robustly proven like psi abilities.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, if you want to argue that precognition is not real, what you end up having to argue is that certain experiments don't seem to replicate very well. But other experiments replicate really well. And so you end up having to make this convoluted argument that we're only going to look at these bad experiments that don't replicate well. We're not going to look at the good experiments that do, and we're not going to look at the people who are gifted at this, who consistently can do this task. We're going to ignore that, and we're going to say that we're only looking at the bad experiments and we're only looking at people who aren't gifted. Well, that's like saying, I want to prove that someone could sing like 3 octaves above middle C, but I'm just going to ask a bunch of people who've never had singing lessons, and if they can't do it, well then C, no one could do it. I mean, it's just it's bad science.
Well, in our group, a lot of people have started working with their dreams, and one of the things that I see reliably is people that start writing down their dreams start becoming precognitive. When you've spent so long studying this, is there a typical way in that works for more people, or is the way that precognition manifests that you think is more prevalent than others?
Dreams are the most is the typical way in for everybody. Or dreams are, I should say, the typical way in for everybody. And not everyone's typical. So some people, it's like they get that, goosebumps on the back of their neck when something's about to happen. And they know it. They'll say, oh, someone's about to die. I got goosebumps, or someone's about to win the lottery, or whatever it is, right? So yeah, if you write down your dreams, that would go in your notebook too. But I would just expand it to everything, because eventually you might want to learn some boundaries around it. And turn it into a practice. So with dreaming, unless you do lucid dreaming, in which case you're sort of controlling things and less able to sort of get the information, you can't put too much control on it. If you wanted to learn precognitive remote viewing, then it previously used to train people in operational precognitive remote viewing, which is just taking any remote viewing modality that anyone has learned with anyone else and putting it in a precognitive wrapper. So you're not front loaded with the information ahead of time. The question comes in the future, the answer comes in the future, and it's all done within it's held in a container of unconditional love. So those are the only things that are added on to the regular remote viewing for OPRV, operational precognitive remote viewing. I'm not training people that anymore, but if people are more interested in it, they can go to the International Remote Viewing Association. And I was the first class that they had on their education program, so I'm sure it's still available on video.
Since you've started doing this personally and since you've trained other people to do it, what changes have you seen in their own day-to-day lives?
Uh, Acceptance, love, willingness to I mean, people get into remote viewing often because they're like, I want to bet on the stock market. I want to figure out if this is going to work for me. I want to figure out which job to take or which person to marry or whomever. And then when they get good at it, it's like, oh, I get it. Everything's connected and the universe is proceeding according to plan. I no longer care about those things because whatever happens is going to be whatever is calculated by the universe. I'm saying this in my own sort of nerdy language, but that sort of feeling is like, I want to use this to bring, how can I use this to bring love? How can I use this to bring comfort to people? How can I use this to find missing persons? How can I use this to find, perpetrators who the police are looking for or whatever? It becomes more of a way to see how humanity can navigate as we move into a new era where we have consciousness technology all over the place.
Well, then, I mean, to what Eric was saying, then that always brings up this question of agency, right? Like, if I become more unconditionally loving, do I have to surrender agency? And what is the role of power within this? So, like, how do those people then deal with their own individual agency, and particularly the role of time in agency?
That's why people stop. So that's what I'm saying about people have this fantasy that they have this power, that if they just have unconditional love, they're letting go of the power of their judgment, the power of their removal, the power of their distancing. Um, it's a big confront. I mean, this is why this is self-transcendent, and it's why it's a big deal. And it's why I'm not always unconditionally loving, or anyone else who studies unconditional love isn't always unconditionally loving. This is because sometimes I get caught up in, right, just like everybody, right, in the like, oh, I don't want to give up that power. The funny thing is, the power is bullshit. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And when you think about time, I mean, I can't help but think about time as this landscape. Are you saying the mountain's not going to be there? Because it's in that landscape, right? It's there. And you going around the mountain and going up the mountain and maybe falling down on your way down the mountain, that's in there too. So what other response is there but unconditional love? Like the idea of change itself, like in terms of physics, the idea of change itself, when you think about the universe being calculated all at once, I know there's a lot of physicists who try to rescue free will. However, that's a psychological rescue. They're trying to rescue a philosophical, psychological concept. But if you just look at the physics of it, the universe being calculated all at once, the only response is unconditional love. What choice do you have if you're born a pedophile or not? What choice do you have? Right? I mean, I'm not saying it's good. I don't want to hang out with pedophiles. I would like them to be locked up. Right? With love. With love.
So maybe
Right?
a good opportunity for us to go into talking about Tilt and what you guys are doing.
Speaking of locked up with love, yes. I've been talking a lot. Eric, you want to take over for a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, so TILT is our acronym for the Institute for Love and Time. Um, our main goal is that we're able to help help the people in institutions and in systems infuse those systems with love and unconditional love. So it gets at this idea of hiring and firing. It gets at this idea of how do we ethically use technology so that we're expressing love to our users in a way that they can feel it and isn't necessarily what we think the users should want. Um, so basically, we create apps right now. It's not necessary that we create apps. That just happens to be where people are. Um, so our pipeline right now is we've just finished an app called the Time Machine app, which gets at all the things that Julia has been talking about integrating the self over time. And I've really enjoyed that one because, well, one because I, I reached a point where I had kind of idea fatigue, and people everywhere have ideas, and I was just so tired of hearing people's ideas And I just wanted, because you're abstracting, which means you're losing information, which means you're not testing to see whether your idea works at every increment. So anyways, I I got really focused on let's take one of these ideas and really work out the details and make it real. And I think that's probably where we diverge from a lot of nonprofits, especially nonprofits that have such grand, scopes like Unconditional Love, is that we're very, very operationally focused on making things real in the world. So, Time Machine, um, I would say like everything that is true, Time Machine is tapping this truth from a direction that a lot of other I would say everybody's tapping the same truth from different directions. So Time Machine dovetails with findings from folks like Dan McAdams and John Adler about the power of narrative psychology and having redemptive narratives versus narratives of contamination, and that being linked to very strong, you know, interpersonal and personal outcomes downstream. It links to the time perspective work by the late Philip Zimbardo, who, if you remember, if you took a Psychology 101 course, he's the one who did the Stanford prison experiments on conformity and role playing and stuff like that. So he had some really interesting work on like what does a healthy time perspective look like? How do you integrate this knowledge that you used to be a person who did all sorts of great things and all sorts of terrible things, with this knowledge that there's this person in the future who's going to continue to do great things and terrible things. And right now, how do we view that from within a frame of unconditional love so that we can, it sounds pie in the sky to say unconditional love, but I think it gives us more of a realistic view of our past and our present selves by just being able to have a look, and then integrating that over time, which ends up being really, really powerful for everyone, but especially for folks who struggle with addiction, who are in and out of prison, um, who have experienced trauma in the past, like say military veterans and so on. So like, how do I reconcile who I was in Afghanistan with who I am in the grocery store today? Looking at the 10 varieties of peanut butter or something like that. So it ends up being really, really powerful. And we're also looking at the psychedelics community as the psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, trend is, it keeps, kitty hawking, like it takes off and then kind of dips and there's some regulation. But one of the things that can really help, we believe, I don't think this is something I can say, is in scientific literature, but we believe that being able to reintegrate after a psychedelic experience and pull that past, present, and future self together to form a cohesive self is going to help increase the safety and the efficacy of psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. So it's something that we would love to test if we find the right partners.
I would encourage anyone listening to download the app and the Time Machine app and play around with it as I have been, and it's been super fun. But maybe like take 2 minutes just to explain how it works and why you think it works.
Yeah, I can tell you how it works, and then maybe Julia can say how you think it works. It's so you go in really quick, you create a user. We don't sell any data. We have, kind of an ambition to, 3 to 5 years ago from now
Time.
to empower users to monetize their own data, because we believe very strongly that user data belongs to the users. And we know that, audio journaling data could be very valuable to health and wellness companies and so on, if somebody wanted to, tokenize that and realize the revenues from it. But we don't have any plans to use the data, ourselves. So you create that user, you go into your time machine, where you're given a prompt, and it asks you a question about your past, present, or your future, and then you riff on it for about a minute. That's it. Non-addictive technology. You can't do anything else. The next day you come in and you listen to yourself, your recording from yesterday, from within the frame of unconditional love, and that's powerful in itself, like hearing your own voice and being able to, like, I hate it. Like, I'm not going to watch this podcast, but no, I will watch this, but um, being able to listen to yourself for a minute can be difficult for some people. So that's already a victory. And then you record another one and another one and another one. And from day to day, you're integrating these questions about your past and your present and your future into what becomes a healthy, balanced time perspective about who you are over time. That's the first sort of module within there. After a few days, it unlocks a meditation tent where you can record your own meditations or listen to some that are pre-recorded by other users, by Dr. Michael Sapiro, who does really interesting research with post-traumatic stress disorder, treating folks coming back, firefighters and veterans and so on. The third module that unlocks is the community garden. So once people are comfortable listening and talking to themselves and approaching things from within this frame of unconditional love, they can go in and record hopes for the community, and the community can add water to those hopes, and you watch them grow over time. So that's one of the, when you look at the predictors of happiness, they all kind of center around being able to sublimate yourself into something bigger than yourself. And one of those things is having a strong network. So we really wanted to make sure we had a community component. And right now, the community component is every user of the app. We also spin off instances for organizations that want to have a closed setting where it's only their users who are in that community. Like, say they're if it's military or if it's addiction based, there's like a level of comfort that people are going to have within that own community. So we're working on creating some of those instances for special groups too.
Yeah, and Eric went to work with some native tribes to do that, and also we're talking to the folks at Adovo about bringing that into prisons.
Mm-hmm.
I hate myself for asking this question, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to apply some.
Oh, wait, let's just back right in.
Apply some unconditional love to myself for asking this question. But
There we go.
A lot of people I know run businesses, and they're going to probably be asking themselves, like, what results do I get from employing unconditional love in my business?
Yeah. Well, maybe their employees will be better at predicting the future. That couldn't be bad for most businesses.
Good point.
And I do a lot of consulting as well, and one of the things that is really, really kills organizations is people being afraid to say things that they know are true. So stepping back from that fear and feeling like they're in an environment, like if you're in a company that asks you to use Time Machine, you're already in a safe environment, most likely, or they're trying to signal that they're safe. But I think that if you're feeling safe and to speak truth, that's going to be good for an organization, even if that truth is really uncomfortable. And everybody can just listen to it and accept it for what it is. And then you can say, do we have the agency to make a change here? I think I tend to fall more on the side of agency than, I don't know if this is true, Julia, but I think I probably fall more on the side of agency than you do.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm not even sure I believe in causality, so agency is.
Well, there's my set of sort of metaphysical beliefs, and then it's just like, here's things that I need to do in the day. and
Oh, right. It's not like I just sit around, but it is interesting how things get done.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Eric, what you were saying about like bringing this into the workplace and how it could actually help with productivity. I think people are so I think those are really good points, being able to say what's true. It's difficult to say what's true if you don't feel that there will be love there. That won't be accepted and heard and loved. And I also think people will work for love. The teams that I have run, my experience is people are working that, yes, there's a minimum amount of salary they need. And for particular professions, they're going to need more than that. Like each person is going to have a salary that they feel comfortable with, right? But if there isn't love there, they're going to be looking for another job. Because that's what people are doing. What are you doing with your waking hours? if you're not working in a team where there's love. I mean, really, that's devastating. So people, and the converse, when there's hard times or a difficult challenge and you have this team that where people know that there's love, people will work and step up for love.
Yeah, it always sounds cheesy, but having been on both sides of that, where like you don't understand if you're in a zero-sum energetically limited engagement all day long, it literally drains your energy. And if you're in a positive sum infinite game all day long, you literally gain energy from your workplace and it becomes more resilient. So like I've seen these structures outcompete over the long term. Those teams that are based on love, unconditional love is probably a lot to ask for, but do tend to outcompete.
That's how you break.
Unconditional love. Yeah, sorry.
That's how you break KPI lock. I don't know if that's a familiar term, but you've got your objectives, you got your KPIs and your OKRs and all these indicators of how well you're performing. And invariably, you can't account for everything with those indicators. And in a culture that doesn't have love, where people want to see one another succeed, anything that falls between those KPIs falls out of the business through the cracks. In an organization that does have love, people will say, well, I'm not being formally tracked on this, but this will help our team, do well, and this will help this person on my team do well. So you have a lot more of that picking up anything that's not made explicit. And I think that's probably the differentiator between organizations that I'm seeing fail and succeed.
Right, because the KPIs all look the same. Like, by the way, please don't make like unconditional love a KPI, because it'll kill it. It won't work. Stop it.
Well, there's something that an investor friend of mine, Chris Begg, calls dynamic quality, which is any company based around dynamic quality, which is essentially the Tao, right? It's essentially beauty and goodness. Companies that are based on with that dynamism, tend to be unbelievably resilient and effective. But the moment you optimize for something static and abstract like quarterly earnings, everything goes off the rails. And you see that dynamic over and over again in public markets in particular. And actually, like, it's the contention of the leading edge and our members, many of whom run companies, and our investors, that we are at a pivot point now, really accelerating probably in 25 and 26, where those zero-sum business models and people operating from a zero-sum mindset are going to be increasingly unable to understand the world. And I guess this is now the pivot into the hard woo, which is one of the things that I've been tracking, is this confluence of things where basically you have the increasing mainstream of psi phenomena in things like the telepathy tapes. You have the UAP phenomena no longer being considered as fringe as before. And you basically have this concept of quote unquote love, still, I think, being relatively stigmatized in hard charging industries, but starting to come into the mainstream. And Julia, I've heard you talk about the links between those phenomena, and I'd be interested to hear what you think about them in general, but also if you see anything specifically changing right now.
Well, telepathy tapes, it's kind of number one on my list, because what they've done is it's like the flip side. So traditionally, the UAP psi world has been sort of conspiracy thinkers, like they have been that world, of which I have unfortunately been a part because of my research. I say unfortunately because it can get really sticky and stupid, just like every little small world that feels stigmatized can get that way. Like the ego can start to get sort of rigid. The UAP and the psi worlds suffered from victimization. Like, no one's listening to us, no one's funding us, but we have this really important thing, but people are paying attention and there's a cover up. And like, sure, it's also true, right? Also, people weren't funding psi and they still aren't. They're still not funding UFO research, and there's still probably a cover up. Like, all those things can be true. But the telepathy tapes has done this cultural shift that says, oh, isn't this cool? It looks like non-speaking autistic kids can share thoughts with their parents and the people they love, and it's all about an underlying basis of love. And we're just going to explore it and find out more about it. And it hinges, and then I think the reason why it's become so popular around the world in terms of English-speaking podcasts is that which is like a podcast, right? Mostly English speaking, is that it takes this positive bent, and it's about the most powerful thing that people have in their lives, really, that gets them closest to unconditional love, which is the relationship between parent and child. So it gets you back to that core experience of unconditional love. Like most people, when you ask, have you experienced unconditional love? They say, when I held my baby for the first time, or when my puppy, when I first met my puppy. You know, it's either a baby or a puppy, something helpless where you can't, like, there's no part of you that wants it to change, because you also know, like, it can't change. It's gonna like drool all over the place, you know? And so it helps you access that. There's no expectation of it to change, right? And so that is what they have captured, I think, in telepathy tapes. And that is where that's going. So I think that's driving a cultural shift where people are going to piggyback on that and use it, those feelings, to say, now, wait a minute, where else can these go? And I think as we start to look at UAP and psi stuff and all these things that have been maligned as too woo or whatever, and we start to say, of course, science can look at this. Of course, we can ask any question we want with science. And what matters is, do we do it honestly, intellectually, honestly, rigorously? And what also matters is, do we do it with love? And can we let go of all the baggage about someone should have told us that the government lied to us? Yes, the government lied to us. Like, join the club, the government lied to us. Also, the government lied to itself. Also, private industry lied to government. Also, private industry lied to us. Also, we lied to them. I mean, it's like, there's lying. We can move towards love, right? And to unravel the truth is so simple when there's love. And that's where I think this is going.
Do you think it's possible for people to accept new data unless there's an explicit, rigorous framework? Like, is it possible for them to see a small truth without a framework? Like, I know it is possible because people have developed things, but I'm thinking, like, in terms of mainstream acceptance, or does there need to be some sort of a framework for those findings to be funneled through?
So that's why I love telepathy tapes, is it is that framework, but it's not a rigorous scientific one. It has to be an emotional framework, because that's what actually moves people. So it keeps reminding me of Jessica Utz, who was hired by the federal government to look at the Stargate stuff back in 1995. And she wrote up, you know, she was the one who said, look, precognition seems to be working. She's a statistician. She was an excellent statistician. She was hired by she was asked by the American Statistical Association in 2016 to be their president. She was voted in. She was the president. She gave a talk, and everyone knows she was involved in this psychic stuff, right? And so in her talk, her presidential speech to a group of statisticians, she says, okay, I really don't understand why you all don't believe in this, because look at the statistics, which is what we study. And she said, so I just want to know, like, raise your hand if I brought you more data, if you would actually believe that this is precognition is happening. And like a few people raised their hand. She goes, okay, raise your hand if you had a strong, emotional, powerful experience related to this, if you would actually think it was happening. 75% of the hands went up. These are statisticians whose job it is to determine whether something is real according to the numbers. They don't believe in that. And what they believe in is their powerful personal experience, just like every other human on the planet. So the way things get mainstreamed is not through scientific results. Not saying we don't have to do the science. If we want to do something cool with consciousness technology and make it work, we have to do the science, right? If we want to understand the way it's working, we have to do the science. But the way things change is through experience and emotion and story.
When you say consciousness technology, what do you mean?
Oh, so I assume that everyone sees that same mountain I see in the landscape of time in the future. Well, would be this is the consciousness technology economy, right? Where instead of attention being the resource that every product is trying to grab, intention is the resource. So it uses your mental intention to do something. And so people's attention is valuable, and you can use direct mind intention to influence whatever it is, right? I don't know, crypto mining or whatever it is, right? So consciousness technology is like that.
So I've heard, again, to take it back to the UAP topic, I've heard that one, people have had encounters fairly reliably report a state of unconditional love, and also there's speculation that the technology is based on an interface with consciousness. Presumably that's like a really out there example of the interface between consciousness and technology.
I don't think if it's out there. I mean, I think that's what consciousness technology is. I think when people talk about, so just to be a little more inclusive, there are also people who have really negative experiences with non-human intelligences or report them and have had like PTSD around it. So just because I happen to know a couple people like that, I just want to say it's not that everyone's like, oh, now I saw the aliens and I feel love. That also happens. Right? So people have all sorts of experiences about those kind of encounters. And the unconditional love is recent in the Jake Barber's story in the recent Psionics Skywatcher episode. He speaks about he was working for a contractor. I don't know if it was a federal contractor, picking up this egg and carrying it and dropping it and having this unbelievable, like starting crying and having this experience of unconditional love. That makes sense to me. As something that if you could master consciousness technology, you would want to produce in something that could crush you. Like that, he could drop the egg. So you would want to produce a feeling of unconditional love, right? It benefits your whole species. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, like they're actually monsters, but they force us to unconditionally love them, and therefore, we're rubes. I'm just saying, like, it's very adaptive. And that's the direction consciousness technology would be going, right? We could save our planet if we could bring unconditional love and the power of that intention into technological applications that could clear carbon dioxide, like Woodbridge Institute and public parapsychology is doing right now. They're trying to clear carbon dioxide, seeing if we can clear it using our intention, right? We could support an area around the world. We could have support for an area around the world, like Israel, Gaza, wrap them intentionally in unconditional love so that that could be healed, right? I mean, it's a whole different way of living. And as we start to be able to create technology, one of the great things about creating technology is it tells you what you've gotten right about the science and what you haven't gotten right about the science. Because you can't create consciousness technology that reliably works without getting the science right. Right? And so that's why I'm pro application rather than what Eric was saying earlier about just abstract ideas, like we should all meditate and stuff, that's great. But if we can meditate in a way that allows our intention to flow into, a specified direction and have a physical impact in the world or a biological impact or a spiritual impact that's measurable, like that's consciousness technology. And that's where we're going next. I'm pretty confident.
So what I'm interpreting from a lot of the conversation, what I'm seeing around me is basically, I think most people, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, their relationship with love earlier in their lives was essentially this concept of a relational love with another human being that's mostly conditional, but sometimes unconditional, often between, say, mother and child, right? But what seems to be happening now is a broader understanding that is a manifestation of a larger force that has way larger implications. And one of the expressions I think you've used previously is a container for the universe. Is that how you see love?
Yeah, I see it as the founding mother, the founding element of the universe, the foundational stuff of which everything is made.
So
I don't know, Eric. You're often a point of view. You have a point of view perspective on this because you think about things more like a business person. How would you frame what I just said in a way that what's going on in your mind over there?
I don't know any of the big answers. I do, if I look at outcomes, one of the outcomes that I see is that unconditional love, regardless of where it comes from or what it is or whatever, is the antidote for behaviorism, where you are rewarding and punishing behaviors to coerce a population or a company or a country or whatever, if you think about social credit scores or something like that, that is behaviorally conditioning what you want. And then it gets into this idea of KPI lock, where people will only follow the incentives that you set out for them. And then everything falls apart because you can't ever get that right. It's too complex. So I'd say if we look at the outcomes, that's the function that I see, is that it creates a container in which behaviorism is just this little tiny speck. And it's like the difference between normative social pressure in small groups, and law, where you need constant surveillance and in order for it to happen. So, and the trouble is we don't scale very well from those small group logics into the larger group logics. Um, and my hope, and I don't know how any of this works, but my hope is that promoting unconditional love will provide some of that lubrication for it to scale. So we don't need to rely on, total surveillance of everything and all the time.
Yes, we could have internal surveillance from our own love standpoints.
Well, so what can we do to help you? Anyone listening, what do you guys need? How do we make sure that you succeed?
I'm the board chair, so I just watch Eric do things. Eric, what would you need to help Tilt succeed for your vision in the next year or so?
Sure. Well, to be fair, I watch the board do a lot. So
Okay.
one thing we need is just spread the word about Time Machine, because the more users we have on Time Machine, as we look for funding for the rest of our technology pipeline, the easier it is to say, look, we've got 200,000 active users every day who are benefiting from this. Every once in a while, we'll drop in and run a pilot and show that there is a tangible benefit that is coming out of it. But users, that's the most important. And it's like meditation in that we don't bug you about using it very often, and we don't make it addictive. So it really has to be from within the user to come back and use it from day to day. So yeah, just spread the word about Time Machine if you would. And then people can also go, so that's at timemachine.love is the URL. And then we have a lot of other stuff in the pipeline. One of them is an empathy technology that's based on mutual gazing. And if you've looked into mirror neurons and all the neat stuff that comes out of that research, our hope is that that can help dissolve some of the abstract boundaries that are causing hatred, and have that be replaced by interpersonal empathy, which can be super powerful. So that's called Vis-a-Vis. We're looking for funding partners and distribution partners for that technology. It's, the technology is there. We just have to make the user experience whatever people want it to be. So if you know crypto bajillionaires, send them our way. We can always use funding for development, and we use our funds extremely efficiently, very low overhead. So yeah, we'd love to talk to anybody you know.
You had it.
Yeah. Oh, and we should say something about Coin of the Realm. Speaking of crypto billionaires or bajillionaires or whatever that term is. Do you want to say something about Coin of the Realm?
I think you understand it better. This is early pipeline.
This is early pipeline. This is like a real life coin, limited quantity that is non-fungible. So not very interesting to investors, except for those who want to invest in community transformation. So there would be like an artist who creates, say, like 11 coins, and each of them represents 11 different attributes that someone's trying to work on. Let's say some inmates, people with PTSD, rich people, whatever group of people, like the friends, and they would each there's like a storage place for the coins. And the coins would be you could not release the coins from storage until you do this block thing on blockchain, which is the opposite of how blockchain is usually used. But anyway, where you register who the coin is going towards, what their goal is in the next month or time period, and then who they plan to give it to after their month, once they've succeeded. If they haven't succeeded, they try to register again until they succeed. So their goal could be like, I want to learn how to connect with myself with unconditional love at least 5 times in this month. And then if you pronounce yourself successful, you pass it to the next person. It's all on chain. And so the whole community that's learning all these different attributes develops and it grows, because now I'm an attribute 10 and I'm thinking, boy, pretty soon I'll be an attribute 11. I might want to start again, or I might want to contribute to a pot of money to get another artist to make 11 more coins for a different community and see how this will grow their community. So it's like that.
It's very powerful, because I have a firmly held view, totally biased, because I've just given up my life to start one, that these kind of love-based communities are going to explode in popularity. And thankfully, I now have anecdata in the form of the number of people that have contacted me in the less than a year since Leading Edge has been running. And so the idea that these kind of tech stacks are taking shape around it, I think is really getting in at the ground floor of an industry that is going to be absolutely explosive.
Absolutely. And so you build this network on blockchain, and you kind of know, I mean, it's not private, it's public, right? So you can really see into, it's like the opposite of a secret society.
So as we wrap up, keeping the spirit of my wife alive, what would you leave listeners with in terms of practical things that they can do in their lives on a daily basis to bring this unconditional love in? Obviously, I've downloaded Time Machine and I've been doing that, but maybe Dr. Mossbridge, like, how should we think about bringing more unconditional love into our lives?
So what really works for that, and this works because it doesn't have to do with you putting something on your list of things to do. What really works, in my experience, is prayer or its equivalent. So if you don't pray, you probably, if you're listening to this and Leading Edge, you probably meditate and have intentions, or have like manifestation goals, or these kind of things that to me are prayers, right? To me, it's like whatever you're praying. And so that really works. But instead of having the goal be, I'm going to feel unconditional, or like or like the intention goal, like I truly experience unconditional love all the days of my life, or whatever that is, that kind of thing, make it a little bit more open to that, something like passive, like, hi, universe, I would love to experience unconditional love right now. That's so much more relaxing, because you're just saying, I would love to experience it. You're not making demands. You're not saying something that's not true, but that you hope is true. So just like, hey, hello, like a hello, like, hey God, there's something I would like right now. And it's kind of magical. And then, of course, download Time Machine. and our future applications that we're working on, and help us, build our curricula. That's the other thing, is that unconditional love grows by just doing it. So I sign all my emails, love, Julia, or with love, respect, and gratitude, Julia, or something like that, because, and I do it in a workplace setting. I work with government people. I do it in a government setting. They love it. They're like confused by it. They're like, why do you sign in love? Like, what if people think that you love me? I'm like, I do love you.
So funny.
It'll be okay. I sign all of them love.
I've started doing the same thing. Doing the same thing. And funny enough, one of there's a chap in our community, I call him our chief mystical officer, and he wrote a piece on the most powerful spiritual technique he'd ever found, which was just simply sending people love, like all the time, particularly people you hate, particularly like famous people that you hate.
Yes.
It's just transformational. It sounds so glib and cheesy, but we've all been doing it for 6 months now, and everyone has reported
it feels wonderful to you, and who knows what it feels like to them, but to you it's very freeing, because this thing that keeps you in relationship with someone when you want to judge them or don't like them or whatever your story is about it, that keeps you in relationship, whereas unconditional love frees you. Like, I send you so much unconditional love, I never want to see you again, and I send you so much unconditional love, right? Like, that's okay. Like, you're not so attached. I don't know. What do you think, Eric? What helps people get to a place of unconditional love more often?
Oh my gosh. I don't know, but I like this idea of prayer. Like you pray to whoever, pray to the aliens. That's fine. There's a lot of Raelian folks up in the town I live in, and learned all about their, and it had ups and downs, but like they were doing a lot of the same stuff. They were just doing it to aliens, and and yeah, I like. I had a professor, Gary Schwartz at University of Arizona, who shared this anecdote about a woman who was terminally ill with a very advanced cancer, and she would spend 2 hours of her 3 productive hours a day sending love out to the universe. And she died of cancer. It didn't heal her. But like, what is the impact of that? And so, with my family, before we eat, it's like, who are we going to send love to today? And I think there's something really, really powerful about that consolidated intention. And I don't I don't know if we need to put all that many names on it, like, but it does help people, I think, to have a name. Um, for me, I think might get in the way a little bit, but yeah, for sure. Like all the things you're saying, like it's stuff that the Buddhists have been saying for thousands of years, right? So,
Yeah, what are the chances it's wrong? And then just a little note on sending love. We talk about it like sending love, but we also talk about unconditional love as a universal resource that you can't send. It's like I'm sending the sun to you. But what you really mean when you talk about sending love is not I'm taking some love from me and I'm reducing. It's not a zero-sum game, right? I'm not reducing my amount of love so you can have some love. But sending love sounds a little like that. So sometimes I like to remind myself when I'm sending love that I'm sending the intention that that person stands out in the sun and accesses love, the love that is already there for them. Like it's a little easier. It doesn't get you in that zero-sum game mindset.
Yeah, that's a lovely framing, actually. Dr. Eric Smith, Dr. Julia Mossbridge, I love you both very much.
Love you too.
I love you, Tom.
Thank you for making time for us today.
That
Thank
was
you.
awesome.